40 years have passed, during which time the Jews have wandered through the desert. So much time has gone by, so much has changed, so many different adventures have been experienced, so much challenge has been endured. The generation which left Egypt have all but died out, and a new generation stands on the threshold of entry into the land. But there's one incident which happened at the very beginning of their journey, which repeats itself again now at the end of their journey with one twist. All those years before, when they headed out from Egypt, they complained, that is, the generation that came from Egypt complained as to the lack of water. God responds by famously instructing Moses to take a stick and strike a rock which would produce water for the people. 40 years on, they complain of thirst once more. Moses' older sister Miriam dies. In her merit there was a well of water, and now it's absent. This time, God instructs Moses to speak to the rock in order for it to produce water. Moses attempts to do so, but seeing no initial response and sensing the growing tension, he hits the rock instead. And whilst water was produced, the future is never the same. Moses is told, because he didn't follow strict instructions, he will not lead these people into the land. And you have to wonder, what's the big deal? A rock produces water. That's the miracle, right? What difference does it then make whether you talk to it or you hit it? Especially as there was precedent, and frankly, it's the end result that counts. Hitting a rock and letting it produce water is a miracle just the same. So why does God hold him to account because he hit the rock instead of speaking to it in this particular instance? Well, let's consider. When you think about a rock feels no pain. We use a rock or a stone as a metaphor to imply the idea of somebody who is cold, who is detached, who is indifferent, hence the term a stone-cold heart. How do you impact a rock? How do you infuse a crude and cold stone-like heart and mind to become a source of water, of wisdom, of enlightenment, of inspiration? What do you need to do in order to quench the thirst of parched souls and irrigate humanity that may be thirsty for fulfillment, for meaning, for purpose? Words, as we often hear said today, matter. Words matter. They are a powerful thing, and they matter a lot. But here's the thing. You can speak your words, or you can actually strike with your words. You can speak softly. You can choose to gently try to persuade and calmly endeavor to enlighten others. Or you can speak your words in a more commanding manner. You can instruct. You can strike. You can give orders. Which approach is the correct one by which to penetrate the rock? Which words work as a key to open a locked heart? Do you speak to the rock, or do you smite the rock? Do you transform by force and coercion, or do you attempt to explain, to teach, to enlighten? Truth? There is no one answer. It depends on the particular circumstances. It depends on the individual situation. It depends on the precise rock that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a primitive state of mind, then sometimes the stronger word is more necessary. But when dealing with a more complex situation, when you're dealing with a more sensitive heart, then needless to say, gentle persuasion rather than hard pressure is the correct approach. It's curious to observe. When the Jews left Egypt, God tells Moshe to hit the rock, and there the Torah uses the Hebrew word tsur, which is a Hebrew word for rock. In this particular instance, when God tells Moses to speak to the rock, it uses the word selah, which is a different Hebrew word for rock. The suggestion is that when God tells Moses to hit the rock using the Hebrew word tsur, that tsur therefore implies a harder, more impenetrable type of rock. But when God now tells Moses to speak to the rock, it uses the Hebrew word selah, which implies a softer type of rock. Hence, when it comes to the harder rock, you've got to strike. When it comes to the softer rock, you've got to speak. You've got to be calm. You've got to try a more sensitive approach. When they left Egypt, upon their exodus, God said to Moses, yes, strike the rock with your stick. The symbolism is that then Moses is dealing with a people that are still locked in their slave mentality. They're primitive. They're used to commands. That's what they know, orders, as they had endured for 2 centuries in Egyptian servitude. At that time, in order to get any message across, it was necessary, if you will, to strike the rock. That's the language that they speak. That's the way to get the message across. Now, 40 years on, they've advanced, they've progressed, They've grown emotionally. They've grown psychologically. They've advanced spiritually. They've progressed intellectually. They are in a very different place. Now God says, speak to the rock. Free-spirited people have to be educated in an uplifting and inspired manner. And the point is that for different people, in different circumstances, explaining has to be done in different ways, through different methods. When a child runs into the street, you don't stop to explain to the child why he or she should get out of the street, why it's not a good idea, why there might be an oncoming car. You strike with your words. They understand when you simply yell, stop. But there are other times that yelling will be utterly counterproductive. It'll be demoralizing, and you need to speak instead. Both approaches are valid. You just need to know who is that child that you're dealing with. By way of anecdote, they tell of a man who comes into a bank at 5:01 p.m. I need to make a deposit. I'm sorry, sir, we're closed. It's urgent. That's only a simple minute. No big deal, sir. All systems shut down at exactly 5 p.m. It's impossible. The man rants. He raves. So the teller summons the manager, a big burly fellow. What's the problem? The problem? I'll tell you the problem. I'm 1 minute late. No big deal. I don't care about your systems. I want to make a deposit. I'm not leaving till I do. The manager comes out from behind the counter, grabs the man, knocks him down with one punch. The man gets up and he says, okay, have a good evening. And as he proceeds to leave, the teller says, whoa, hang on. I'm standing there telling you for 10 minutes how I can't help you. You don't listen. My manager shakes you and punches you, and now you listen. And the man says, you don't understand. You told me. He explained it to me. I'm obviously not advocating that kind of approach, but I'm making the point that this story about rocks is more than just about Moses and the people of Israel. It's there to convey to you and me a moral lesson about the relationship between people, about the art of communication. There are two states of consciousness that we encounter in other people, and we've got to get to grips with it, and we've got to deal with it accordingly. When the Western Wall was liberated in Jerusalem and Jews were able to return to that sacred landmark in 1967, the British Chief Commissioner asked the then Chief Rabbi Cook, what's the big deal about the Western Wall? It's but mere stones. To which Rabbi Cook replied very poignantly to this British officer, there are stones that are soft and can melt like butter, and there are hearts that remain hard like rock. What he was saying is, you can speak to these stones. This is the place where right beneath the surface are the tears and the sweat and the blood of the people absorbed through the many millennia. Speak to these stones and water will come gushing forth. Sometimes we struggle to get through to our kids. Sometimes we find communicating with our spouse challenging. Sometimes we simply can't seem to impress a point upon a friend or a work colleague. And frankly, sometimes we have a hard time communicating even as we have conversations with ourselves. The question is, how are you conducting the conversation? In every single rock, there is waters of light and inspiration. Sometimes it's deep inside. Sometimes it's more surface-like. We have to know how best to access it. And it's when we get that balance right, that will make all the difference in enduring impact and a lasting impression. Our ancient sages famously tell us, when we are kind at a time when we need to be a little bit more tough or cruel, we'll end up being cruel at a time when we otherwise need to be kind. We have to know how to get the balance right. Here's the kicker. There are two words for stone, as we said. Tsur, the word that God used when telling Moshe to strike the rock, implies harder. That was then. Strike it. Sela, the term that God uses to describe a stone when he tells Moses to speak to the rock, implies softer. And that was now. Speak to it. It's a balanced approach, and we have to know when to apply whichever one. Get it wrong? Speak softly, be weak with someone who requires hard talk, and there'll be consequences. Conversely, speak harsh to someone who needs your sensitivity, and there'll be a price to be paid then too. Get the balance right, and you'll make your dramatic impact on your surrounds. And by the way, in Hebrew, every Hebrew letter has a numerical value. When you add up the Hebrew letters and the numerical value of the Hebrew word tsur, that one word for hard stone, and sela, the other word for soft stone, they add up to a total as the same as the Hebrew word for kotel in reference to the Western Wall. That's a very powerful message that we ought to take with us through life never more important than in our own present day and age.